On today's episode of May the Record Reflect.
If you have vocal fillers in your vocabulary, you have to start to get annoyed and catch it and know that you're doing it. I've heard some well-intentioned advisors say, just stop doing it. And it doesn't work, because if it's part of your endemic speech pattern, that's the kind of thing where you have to replace it. So the two pieces of advice I give to people is, after they're catching themselves and being annoyed in what they're doing themselves, is to stop. Like, you have to literally stop right before the or the like or the so comes out. So it feels like an abrupt halt. And it, again, will feel that way to you. But what happens is you're replacing it with the pause. But the stop will eventually not feel so much as a jolt. And the nuclear fix is to swallow, like I just did. Because if I feel it coming and I swallow, it's impossible to vocalize and swallow at the same time.
But a friendly smile makes you more credible, more likable, and jurors will listen then to the evidence that you present through a different filter. So a smile is a big unconscious thing that you can control, but that unconsciously people will up your credibility, especially at the beginning of when you speak, in the first 30 seconds of when you speak. You know, that first 30 seconds is when people are forming their impression on, do I believe this person? Do I like this person? Are they likable? And that smile in that time is really, really important.
That was Dr. Karen Lisko and Judge Chris Whitten, and this is May the Record Reflect. Hello and welcome to the monthly podcast of the National Institute for Trial Advocacy. I'm your host, Marcy Mangan, and in today's episode, I'm talking to Dr. Karen Lisko and Judge Chris Whitten about 12 tips for assertive oral communication. These tips come from Dr. Lisko's newest book, Kind Dynamite, which is a treasure chest of information about how to communicate with both professional and personal dynamism. Dr. Lisko is a senior litigation consultant at Ashurst Perkins Coie in Phoenix, where she works with legal teams to develop persuasive case strategies for bench and jury trials as well as arbitrations. Dr. Lisko is a former president of the American Society of Trial Consultants, and in 2024 received its Lifetime Achievement Award for her contributions to the field. She's joined in conversation today by her friend and our longtime program director, Judge Chris Whitten. Judge Whitten was appointed to the Superior Court bench in Maricopa County, Arizona in 2006. Over the years, he has presided over civil, criminal, tax, family, and juvenile court matters. In January 2026, Judge Whitten was appointed to the NETA Board of Trustees. And if you're a longtime listener, you might remember his name from his previous appearances here on the podcast. I hope you'll enjoy listening to today's conversation with Judge Whitten and Dr. Lisko. The oral communication tips they discuss are not just for trial lawyers, they're for everyone. Because at some point in all our lives, we have to communicate effectively, we have to advocate for ourselves or for another person, we have to be persuasive and gain support, and if we're really lucky, we get to do some public speaking too. And with that said, here's our interview. Throughout the almost 8 years of this podcast, the topic of how to deal with opposing counsel's obstreperous, or maybe we should say aggressive, communication style in the courtroom has come up from time to time. But today, we're going to be talking about something a little bit adjacent to that, and that is how to cultivate in yourself an assertive communication style. Dr. Karen Lisko published her latest book, Kind Dynamite: 6 Ways Women Can Use Our Uniquely Explosive Power to Persuade in Meetings, last year, And in it, she discusses 12 attributes of assertive communication. 6 of those are verbal cues, and the other 6 are nonverbal cues. And fortunately, they are all attributes that we can develop and refine, whether you are a woman or a man. Whenever possible, I like to begin these podcast conversations with a definition of terms so that we're all starting out on with the same point of understanding. So I will ask you, Dr. Lisko, what is the difference between an assertive communication style and an aggressive one?
That's such the right question, because a lot of people morph the two and think that they're in some ways interchangeable. And in fact, any kind of communication we use comes through 3 channels, and this is no exception. So I'm going to actually break it apart among the 3. And the first, the most common, is language. We think about it, and there's actually a common point of starting, whether it's assertive or aggressive. And that is that both of those types of approaches use word efficient, bottom line language, but that's where the similarity ends. Assertive language is empowering, such as saying, we will benefit by doing the following. And it adds the next thing, which is why it matters. It's something I teach that I literally call the what, why in language. But if it's aggressive language, it's only an accusatory demanding what, such as just do it. So there's no why behind it. And that is the insult in the use of language. It's more of an aggressive use of words without providing the significance or the why behind it. The second area, and we're talking about this today, are paralinguistics, which is how our voices sound. And in the assertive mode, it's a firm volume. It's still strong, but it's different from aggressive, which is what I call an aggravated volume. And then the third channel of communication, of course, are the nonverbals. So if we were to see each other in this podcast, it would be that I'm using in my assertive style probably a no-nonsense smile when I'm saying the words that I'm saying. And of course, aggressive, it's more stern or a scowl. So you have just a bit of commonality when it's word efficient bottom line language, but that's where the similarities end.
Great. Well, this should be a fun talk. Judge Chris Whitten, I know that you have read Dr. Lisko's book. Would you like to start us off with the very first of the verbal attributes?
Sure. And I've read Dr. Lisko's books, Karen's books, plural. She's published a number of books, but this latest one, Kind Dynamite, is fantastic. I would just point out that the word woman appears in the title of it, but it applies to both genders equally in almost every aspect. There's a couple of things unique, but the communication advice it gives are as helpful to me as they would be to any female. So I just, if you're male and you're out there going, well, I don't want to read a book that's aimed at women, knock it off. This is a good one. Read it. In her first chapter, Karen's talking about the pace at which we speak being an aspect of how persuasive we can be. And I think I've talked with Karen many times, and I think, and Karen, I know this is my subject, but I want to kind of throw it back to you because you talk about a social science study that studied how fast people can talk and still be well understood. And every time you talk about it, when we teach, people doubt it. They're surprised by it. They need to be convinced of it. Talk to us about that, because I think it's a really surprising one, and you know it a lot better than I do.
Well, I appreciate the lob on it. It's counterintuitive for a lot of people. Most of us speak at a rate of 140 words per minute. But the shock to people is that most people can hear or absorb 300 words per minute. So the advice that's often mistakenly given is to slow down. It's the wrong advice because first of all, research finds that a slightly faster pace, something I call a conversational pace, is more credible. And if you slow down, you can unintentionally sound condescending or lacking in confidence. Plus, when you think about that word speed differential, it means people can really let their mind wander and come back if you're speaking too slowly and you're still on the same topic or sentence. So a slightly faster pace is more credible.
Well, that's fascinating. And it is true that when people speak too slowly, you lose your audience.
For sure.
Dr. Lisko, what is the second attribute then?
Well, it's actually very important when you think about pace, and that is silence, pausing. Because, of course, there are people out there who go too rapid fire, and it's because if I were to demonstrate it, it's going this fast. There's no pause in between. Somebody seems nervous because everything is blurring into the next sentence, and you're worried the person is going to faint because they're going to hyperventilate and not pause. So the antidote for the too fast talker is, of course, to vary sentences and to pause, especially after they either say something profound or right before they do it. So I actually like to think of it as a triad, because one of the most dramatic things you can do is to say to your listener, and especially if it's a fact finder, think about this. Pause. Okay, now, two things happened. One to the listener and one to the speaker. The listener actually gets a moment to catch up and to think. You're asking them to visualize. But I guarantee you, if you're effective at pausing as the speaker, it feels dramatic, prolonged, and painful. For one reason, pausing is something we know we're about to do. So when we do it, we think, oh, this is taking too long, when in fact, it's just right. A pause to us as the speaker always feels longer than it does to the listener. So I promised you three. The second is what I call the cliffhanger pause. For example, if you say, and here's why that evidence matters. Pause. Don't rush into it. You just found drama in your use of your voice through saying nothing. I mean, that's kind of ironic, right? Because the pause is the absence of speaking. And trust me, a fact finder loves that small micro vacation. And then the third is what we often always do, which is go to the rhetorical question. Something like, so what do you think happened next? And literally most people listening in their brains are thinking about the answer to the question you raised. So giving that what may feel like to you as the speaker over dramatic beat of silence is super powerful. And it's, again, a good antidote to somebody talking too fast and not breaking it up.
Karen, I couldn't agree with you more. As a fact finder, when you don't give me that pause, especially after important evidence comes in, I find myself thinking or having an internal dialogue about what that just meant, and I miss like half of what the next thing you say is. And so those pauses are just so welcome for me when I'm listening.
And most people don't think about them intentionally enough. That's the mistake. That's where thinking about silence as an affirmative step is the big difference between an okay speaker and a great persuader.
You know where else I see this is people who really are good at this, who are conscious about intentional pausing. Then we'll read a document and we'll read a document like this as if it didn't have any periods or commas or anything. And all of a sudden they feel like because it's not their words they're creating, they don't have to think about any of those things that they normally would.
And I'll bet you see that on the bench a lot. I mean, you not only are you the presiding judge over a trial, but you also teach at NITA. So that must be an interesting experience for you.
It's fun.
So I feel like number 3 is actually the opposite of number 2, which of course is pausing. Dr. Lisko, what is number 3?
The vocal filler, the dreaded vocal filler. And you know it when you hear it, but a lot of speakers don't hear it in themselves. And I have to laugh about it because I've been teaching this for 3 decades now. And back when I started studying and researching this during my doctoral work, it was mostly just ums, uhs, and ers. But it becomes something that changes. For example, today, I'll bet you know, the big vocal filler is either like, especially if you have a teenager. I'm like, and then he's like, and then she's like. So people are using it, but it's also replacing the verb says, and it's a vocal filler. So it's got 2 sins that it commits. And then the thing at the very end of a lot of smart sentences where people will say something, right? And then they say something else smart, right? And they keep doing it, and it becomes a habit that they don't even notice anymore.
If you don't mind me interjecting for just a moment, I would like to talk about my own experience in developing as a podcast host. This is our 81st episode, and before each episode is recorded, or excuse me, released, I have to listen to the draft from start to finish about 3 times. Now, part of NITA's learning by doing methodology that we use at our programs is called video review. You practice a skill, say cross-examination, before the group, and it's recorded on your phone. And then the faculty member or program director, whoever's leading the group, will give a quick evaluation before the group, and then you toddle off with your phone and have a one-on-one with the faculty member. And they go through and talk to you about your performance. And I bring this up because when you're building that muscle memory, you're doing this learning by doing. And I'm kind of doing my own personal video review every single month, listening to these drafts of the episodes. And I've noticed a few things about my own delivery over those, like I said, 81 episodes that I've recorded. And I noticed them. I've really worked on them, and I've actually been able to improve on them over the year. And the first one is eliminating what you're talking about, those kind of non-fluencies, those filler words. And like you said, you don't notice them in the moment when they're coming out of your mouth. But when you listen to yourself on playback, oh man, they're just so obvious and it's so painful. And what I noticed is that they always made me sound nervous and kind of unsure of myself. And like you said, people are uncomfortable with silence and they just rush to fill it. And personally, I don't want to be that person anymore who rushes to fill it with, right, like, so, those kinds of words. And so you just have to teach yourself to be comfortable with that second or 2 of silence. And you think you're going to sound dumb or that the pause is just an interminable amount of time, but it's not. Not at all.
Well, and I have to tell you, I haven't heard you use one vocal filler in what you just did.
Oh, well, thank you. It's like I said, I'm living proof that if you work at it, you can get better.
I listen a lot for it because I do a significant amount of witness preparation in cases, and was just in a witness prep yesterday in the Pacific Northwest. And we do the same thing. We do the video review just like I do when I'm the communications specialist at a NITA program. And doing the playback is step 1 because there's a whole arc of how people learn to change habits. And there are 4 parts to it. I'm not going to go into all the 4 parts, but it starts with what's called unconscious incompetence. We don't know we're doing it. So doing the video review goes to the second necessary step, which is conscious incompetence.
Yes.
Where you catch yourself in the act of it. And the thing that is important in trying to fix it, you've already identified one, is the pausing, is catching yourself in the act of doing it. So you have to necessarily, if you have vocal fillers in your vocabulary, you have to start to get annoyed and catch it and know that you're doing it. I've heard some well-intentioned advisors say, just stop doing it. And it doesn't work because if it's part of your endemic speech pattern, that's the kind of thing where you have to replace it. So the two pieces of advice I give to people is, after they're catching themselves and being annoyed in what they're doing themselves, is to stop. Like, you have to literally stop right before the or the like or the so comes out. So it feels like an abrupt halt. And it, again, will feel that way to you. But what happens is you're replacing it with the pause. But the stop will eventually not feel so much as a jolt. And the nuclear fix is to swallow, like I just did.
Oh,
Because if I feel it coming and I swallow, it's impossible to vocalize and swallow at the same time. Good news again is you won't be doing it forever. It's just that you are literally rewiring your brain and your speech patterns by either doing the abrupt stop before the or the comes out, or swallowing before the like or the so comes out. And eventually you won't be having to do those conscious jolt type things anymore. So there is hope.
there is.
But it is a process.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you mentioned the word so, and that happens to be my favorite crutch word. I use it as a transition word at the beginning of a sentence when we're moving from topic to topic. And, it's okay once or twice in an hour, but throughout an entire conversation, it's really, really noticeable, and it doesn't sound professional. So there, I said it.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
Where you just did it, because it's a bridge word.
Yeah.
So go easy on yourself, because some research last year came out about vocal fillers that found that some vocal fillers are actually healthy because they bridge and you keep the floor. The funny thing about what you're saying is that I read a lot of deposition transcripts in my work, and it seems like the first word in a lot of deponents' answers is
So.
so.
Yeah,
Right.
It's not just me.
It's not. You're in good company.
And Karen, what you said about the advice you hear people give on even at NETA programs on the filler words is just stop doing that. Really, you need to really think about it. And I get that might help people. Marcy, it might help you in hosting podcasts like this to just be very conscious of it. The problem with the trial order is you've got X amount of bandwidth. And if you're using a big part of that bandwidth to concentrate on not saying so at the beginning of the question, that bandwidth isn't being used to form your question, to listen to the answer, all the things that are equally or more important than the filler word. So Karen's idea of replacing instead of just focusing on not doing it has the added, it doesn't take as much bandwidth.
That's a great point, Chris, because here's what I firmly believe when I teach it, either to witness or attorneys. I will say to them, don't wait to think about it until you're on your feet practicing your opening or your direct examination. Instead, think about it tonight at dinner, tomorrow on a video conference, the next day in a meeting, when you're having casual conversation. Because it's truly where people improve, when they're thinking about it offline, so to speak, and they're aware of it on a daily basis. That's where I see the most improvement happen when I come back again in a second session, either with a witness or an attorney. I can tell the ones who have been cognizant of it on a daily basis, just in casual conversation. That's where you improve.
I knew that I was going to learn some new things in recording this episode. This is so great. All right, well, let's move on to attribute number 4. Judge Whitten?
Let's do it. I'm going to steal an example that, Marcy, I heard on one of your podcasts a year, maybe 2 years ago, and I can't remember. It was a judge from, or a prosecutor, rather, I think from, I can't remember. But I actually sent him an email after listening to the podcast and said, that was just such a great piece of advice. And what he said is, if you've been in a courtroom and somebody has walked in the back door, they had no purpose there. They just walked into the wrong courtroom. What happens? Every head in that courtroom, the staff, the lawyers, the witnesses, the jurors, everybody turns and looks because it's a change event. And any change event re-sparks attention. And one of the change events we have control over easily is the volume at which we talk. And it's not the volume so much as the variation in volume that is the change event. And it can be either way. People think when we're teaching Anita, we talk about volume, controlling your volume. People think, oh, I got it. I got to talk loud. And it sometimes means that if you really like the old Sophia Loren perfume commercial, if you want to get someone's attention, whisper. So it's changing the volume that really has an impact on people. And conversely, a lack of change in volume, especially if it's matched with no pausing and a what Karen calls in her book, I think, lawyer voice, or a tone that is non-conversational, is about the worst trial to sit through in the world. It's just boring. So be that change event, be the courtroom door opening and everyone re-upping their attention by just changing the volume a little bit at an important part of an examination or a opening or a closing.
I love that you remember the Sophia Loren commercial.
I think there are probably 90% of the podcast listeners that are going to have to Google that, but I appreciate it. That's how I know my friends. I use that analogy.
I'm your vintage, Chris. I well remember it. One of the things that I often find when I deal with someone who lacks confidence is that when they do increase their volume, it has some byproduct advantages. And I can't explain why from a social science perspective, but I just keep seeing it where when someone increases their volume, their face gets more animated, their eyes get brighter. But I could not agree more with Chris that they can't just keep it loud. That variety is crucial. And for all the reasons Chris said, makes a big difference when people are listening because they do need that change. But it does help someone, again, who feels less confident to increase their volume. Plus, it actually burns adrenaline when we do it. And adrenaline is that nervous energy that we all recognize when it bubbles up inside our beings. So when you release some of it through a strong volume, it will actually have a calming effect. So you get the double whammy of, I sound more confident if it's my baseline. And secondly, I actually feel calmer. So that's a good side benefit of it.
It's interesting when you talked about how increasing the volume of your voice increases your presence and your volume. What I thought about was that old Amy Cuddy super pose. I think that's what it's called. Power
Right.
pose, where
Pose.
you just, you spread your arms and your legs and you just take up more space. And if you are increasing the
Right.
volume of your voice, you're kind of doing the same thing. You're increasing the amount of personal space that you're taking up.
That's a perfect analogy, Marcy.
Oh, thank you. Would you like to move on to number 6?
Sure, I think it flows naturally from what Karen was just talking about with the adrenaline. One of the things, and this is what, and Karen, I don't want to embarrass you, but one of the things I love about Karen and working with Karen is that she's a social scientist, and the things that she says may seem so natural, but she backs them up with studies that have been done and that prove the things that we think are true. And if you read chapter 5 of her book, it talks about your pitch at which you speak. People think their pitch is what it is. It's not something we have the ability to affect, and it's wrong. That's completely wrong. We talk at different pitches, and one of the things that takes our pitch higher is adrenaline and nerves and exactly the kind of atmosphere that courtrooms live in, that courtroom trial lawyers live in. So what happens when we get nervous, when we get into an exciting situation, is we tend to start talking faster and we tend to start talking at a higher pitch. And all of the research shows that's less credible. It's not, I think this is one of the areas I talked about where your book really does address a problem that women face more than men, that you get when you get into the higher pitch, it sounds, I don't remember if you actually said it, and I always think it's sort of the Valley Girl kind of sounding. And it's everybody who has been studied on this says that's a less credible speaker. So how do you fix it? You don't try and talk at a low voice because it sounds artificial and not genuine. You have a natural pitch that's lower. And if you think about maybe role playing and you're a doctor and you're delivering a diagnosis that's very serious, talk how you naturally would in that situation. There's your lowest natural pitch. That's your persuasive pitch. You can practice like all of these other skills. It is a learnable thing to use your lowest natural pitch in tense situations, to not let your voice and your pitch kind of float up when you get nervous.
Chris, one thing I would add to that too is sometimes women will say, well, okay, so the men have us beat on that because most men have a deeper pitch physiologically. But I do want to underscore that research finds that women and men are equally as credible in 2026 overall when they use powerful demeanor, and that it's about what you said. It's your lowest natural pitch. So men don't have the edge. It's only that sometimes I'll use myself as an example. When I was fresh out of my doctoral program, I was 26 years old, thrown into advising witnesses and attorneys, and I was scared to death. And so I was talking at a higher pitch, and I didn't realize I was doing it like I'm doing right now. And then I took my own research that I had done in my dissertation and threw it at myself. And so you literally, if you hold your fingers to your sternum and try to make your voice vibrate, now I'm doing that. And my pitch is my deepest natural pitch. So it's just like you said, Chris, it's within your own physique. You don't have to fake it, but find that vibration when you're speaking. And that's how you can diagnose where you are and where your best pitch level is.
And when we say that it's something you can change, go do exactly what Karen just said. Put your hand on just above your sternum, on your chest bone, and talk at a voice where that vibrates. And then record yourself.
Yeah. And then it's the fun part of what Marcy said. Then you get to listen.
Yeah. Maybe you take that recording and you put it aside for a day before you listen to it, when we're much kinder to ourselves. But listen to it and then listen to yourself talk quicker and faster on something you're more excited about. And even right now, my voice is getting a little higher when I do it. So men or women, I think we can both find finding that lowest natural pitch is a doable, learnable skill.
But it is like volume. Like you said, having the variety is good. So if your pitch varies, don't sweat it. It actually can show that excitement if it goes up a bit. It's just that you want your baseline to be your lowest natural pitch. Can I actually explain why we don't like the sound of our voice?
I want to hear this.
The physiological reason is when we are speaking, we hear a warped version of our own voice because we're living inside our bony cranium. So the way we hear ourselves is inaccurate. So here's the tough love on it. The way we sound to the outside world is accurate. It's how we sound. So, I always suggest a party trick where if you can pull your ears forward while you're speaking, you can hear how you sound to the outside world because now you're experiencing your voice outside your cranium. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but how you sound on that audio, that's the real you.
It is. And that brings up a point that I wanted to mention, which is that in my experience doing the podcast, of course, I've gotten used to my own voice and I'm fine with it. But a lot of the guests, who I will hasten to add, are some of the best trial attorneys in the country. can't stand listening to the audio draft that our producer sends to them to review before we publish the podcast episode. They will write back to me and say, "Oh, God, I was so uncomfortable listening to myself. I can't believe that's what I sound like." And I just said, that's what everybody thinks. And
Right.
I've had a couple who said, "Marcy, I actually didn't listen to the episode. I trust you. I just don't want to listen to the sound of my voice." So it really is a common thing. And I was thinking about it when preparing for this interview. And I just want to offer a little bit of food of thought. And this comes from my own personal life. So it's a slight digression, but we'll get there. I was relinquished for adoption as an infant. And when I was 20 years old, I searched for and was reunited with my birth mother. And
Wow.
we don't look terribly alike. I look more like my father's mother, who is Irish. But I grew up for those 20 years prior thinking like no one in my adoptive family, looking like no one in my adoptive family, acting like none of them. And I kind of felt like I was hatched from an egg. So when I got to meet my birth mother, I was absolutely fascinated by every single similarity. Our faces weren't exactly the same, but we had the same intellectual capacities and interests, the same sense of humor, gestures, inclination. I remember we cross our big toe over our smaller toe when we're barefoot and sitting on the couch. And so when
Wow.
you have nothing, every little thing is something. And so about 4 months into our relationship, we decided that we would get an apartment together and try to make up for some
Wow.
lost time. And so not long after that, the phone rang. And this was back in the olden days before there were cell phones. So it was a landline. And the phone rang. And my mother, Mickey, went to answer it. And she's like, "Hello? Oh, no. Hi, this is Mickey. Hang on, Marlene. Let me go get your daughter." And the caller was my adoptive mom. And so I picked up the phone. I said, "Hi, Mom." And my mom said, "I thought that was you who answered the phone. You and
Wow.
Mickey have the exact same voice." And for me,
Wow.
that was just a huge moment hearing that I actually sound like somebody else, that I did not hatch out of an egg. The sound of my voice comes from my mother. And
Yeah, that is
the
so
sound of
cool.
her voice might have come from her mother or maybe her Swedish grandmother. I don't know. But the point is that we don't just get our looks and our inclinations from our ancestors, we also get our voices. So, to wrap this up, what I want to offer is when you have to listen to yourself on tape and you wince and you cringe, maybe reframe how you think about it. Because when you hear yourself, you're listening to a voice that has been handed down to you from generations of your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your aunties and your uncles. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. So maybe don't hate on yourself so much.
That's
I love that.
profound. Plus, people will remember this far and away beyond a lot of what else we're talking about because you just told a story that was a beautiful one. But research also finds stories create sticky memories in our brains. It's called neuroplasticity. And you just gifted the listener with that story. So thank you for
Oh,
that.
that's nice to hear. And then getting back to some of the tips and suggestions that you have both been offering, if you don't love something about your voice, just know that you can make those little adjustments and improvements, and bit by bit, you'll get more comfortable with the way that you sound.
Yeah, but Marcy, the changes we're talking about, your mother or your adopted mother would still think you sound like your natural
It's
mother,
true.
your birth mother. You can make volume changes and
Right,
you can be conscious and have
right.
control over your pitch. It's still you.
Okay, well, true confessions with Marcy Mangan. Should we?
That's great.
Should we?
Okay, so now we have the dreaded vocal inflection.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So we all know it when we hear it because the person's voice goes up when they're speaking. And you notice it like what I'm doing right now. And this is what also adds to the feeling of the old Valley Girl. But the biggest mistake is not correcting this one. This is one that demands attention. And I have to tell you, I always notice it when I listen to public radio. And invariably, when I hear someone doing this as the reporter in public radio, 9 times out of 10, it's a newspaper reporter who's speaking. In other words, they're not as schooled as someone who is an on air reporter, because you don't hear on air reporters having their voices go up at the end of each phrase where it sounds like they're questioning and they're not sure. And it's also the easiest fix of everything we've talked about, because all you have to do, again, you have to be annoyed and catch yourself in the act of doing it. But what I'm doing right now is just telling my voice to have a downward inflection at the end of a phrase. And I invariably sound more confident in what I'm saying simply because the inflection is going down. That's the fix.
If you've got that upspeak, I think it's called, it sounds like you're asking a question rather than making a statement.
Right. Exactly right.
All right. Well, then we'll move on to our 6 nonverbal attributes of assertive delivery. Judge Whitten, will you lead us off with this set, just like you did with the first one?
Sure, and it's one that made me smile when I read it in Karen's book, because it seems out of place both in a book about trial advocacy and communication skills and in a courtroom. The first nonverbal communication piece is smile. And you think, God, well, we're dealing with a wrongful death of a baby or a bet the business kind of commercial case or a criminal case where someone's got, a lot at stake. Smiling seems out of place, but it isn't. I think some non-trial lawyers would tell you, look, this is how jurors ought to decide cases. They listen to the evidence, they kind of plug it into the data machine, they test the credibility of witnesses, and they come to a conclusion. And maybe that's right. Maybe that is how it had to happen, but it's not how it actually happens. Real people decide who they trust and who they believe. And I'm not talking about a big circus clown smile, but a friendly smile makes you more credible, more likable, and jurors will listen then to the evidence that you present through a different filter. So a smile is a big unconscious thing that you can control, but that unconsciously people will up your credibility, especially at the beginning of when you speak, in the first 30 seconds of when you speak. That first 30 seconds is when people are forming their impression on, do I believe this person? Do I like this person? Are they likable? And that smile in that time is really, really important.
And Marcy, could I add to that? Because exactly what Chris is saying, it's important. It's so much so that it's been found to be the number one sign of nonverbal confidence, smiling. And Chris, I love that you said that first 30 seconds, because there's always opportunity for warmth. And it's actually not just a nice idea, it's crucial. Because if you were to, and we're doing a dissection right now of all of these uses of voice and uses of nonverbals. But if you throw them all together and make one fell swoop statement, the research bottom line finds that the most credible speakers have a non-negotiable combination of warmth and competence. And warmth comes through what we're talking about right this minute, that you want to show that more conversational side of yourself, even in a serious case, because a lot of more novice speakers tend to make the mistake of going too formal, which sounds less confident. But the goal of the naive speaker going formal is thinking, but wait, I need to sound professional, so I need to be official and formal. And it actually backfires if you do not add warmth as well, because the warmth is where the confidence is discerned by your fact finder.
Exactly. The insecurities often produce stiffness in people, and so when we're stiff like that, and that person doesn't smile, confidence produces sort of a comfortableness, a confidence that people who have that confidence do smile. And that goes backwards through the jurors who see the person who smiles must be confident. The person who's too stiff must be worried.
Exactly. And you can't overdo it. I mean, we've all seen the commercials where there's oftentimes people in our industry, lawyers who are selling their services on commercials, who plaster on the fake smile. That is not what we are advocating here at all. It needs to feel like it makes sense with what you're saying, and you don't have to keep it plastered on the entire time you're speaking.
Karen, you talked earlier, and I don't remember which of the verbal ones it was about, that a physiological change happens when you do this. I think smiles are that way too. When you are comfortable and confident and smile, you become more confident and more comfortable. And I think your body language, everything gets that, you're not just smiling with your lips and teeth, you're smiling with everything.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, a study found that even if it's just audio, like we're doing right now, if I'm smiling and I'm doing it, I'm smiling right now, a listener can tell that you're smiling. They don't just have to visually see it. So it's worth, if you're on an audio only forum or a phone call, to know that it's worth it in that kind of a medium too, to show.
If I'm going to be thinking every time I listen to one of these podcasts now, Marcy, whether she's smiling or not.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up, Dr. Lisko, because I do have another story.
Oh, good. Lay it on us.
All right. I have worked in law literally my entire adult life, ever since 21 forward. My first job in law was working in a huge law firm in Denver, and I was the receptionist on one of the 6 floors. And some of the advice that I got during my training was to smile. Smile when people are coming off the elevator and make eye contact with them as they approach my desk. I am the first person to make that first impression of the law firm. So smile. It makes me come across warm, friendly. But then to your point, Dr. Lisko, smile when answering the phones. That was the other way that I could make a good first impression of the law firm. Smile when I answer the phone, because it does come across when you are on the phone and they can't see you. You just sound friendly and warm. And that's another great opportunity to make that first impression. And so relatedly, as I've gotten deeper into my experience with the podcast, I did remember this advice eventually. And so when I'm recording the intro and outro after the recording with the guest, I am in my clothing closet grinning like an absolute idiot when I record that, because it just sounds so much better. And you can tell. You absolutely can tell.
Right. You can.
So I mentioned making direct eye contact with clients as they were coming off the elevator. And I think that is point number 8. Dr. Lisko, would you like to take that one on?
Sure. I mean, it may seem like this is the most basic of all of them. Of course, we all know we should make eye contact. But believe it or not, some people are better at it than others, especially if they're addressing a jury. So let's assume you're in front of a jury of 12. We all gravitate to the head nodder because we think that person is with us, likes us, is listening. And trust me, research finds the nonverbals of the jury when they're not speaking are not reliable. Not reliable. In fact, I will tell you a micro story. I've been asked many times as a trial consultant by clients if I would come into the courtroom and sit in the gallery and watch the jury watch the lawyers and watch the witnesses. And 100% of the time, I decline, because it's an exploitation of their client's money to have me do that, because watching the jury react is not reliable. Yet I'm sure Judge Whitten sees this in his courtroom a lot, where people are dying for feedback and dying to see how the jury looks. So just know that you might find some temporal comfort in thinking the juror looking back at you as you look at them is with you. But a lot of times when I talk to jurors after trials are over, that juror is just a head nodder for everybody. And they're not necessarily with you. And by the way, the one who looks asleep caught everything. So just don't overanalyze what's happening with them when you're looking at them with your good eye contact. But here's the tip I want to offer. The tip is you don't have to make direct eye contact with every single one of the 12. It's a lot of pressure. But when you make eye contact with a section of the jury, that's often good enough. That jurors often think you're looking right at them. If you're looking at juror 1 and juror 7, who are one in front of the other. So take the pressure off yourself to make that individual eye contact 1, 2, 3, 4 through 12. But there's actually something that comes with direct eye contact. It's warm, elevated eye contact, which means your face is more alert, your eyes are bigger. That kind of energy, especially, Marcy, with the smile where it makes sense, is someone who is showing the fact finder, I believe in what I'm saying. I'm looking at you. And by the way, this is a great thing to do with your witness too, who's on the stand in your direct examination of your witness, to give them that mirroring kind of behavior. But eye contact is not created equally. It's not just the eyeballs looking. It's doing it with more vibrance, more energy, and with other things going on with your face.
Karen, you call it, I love this from your book. You call it kind eye contact. I love that. That's so, I think, descriptive of what you're talking about, what I see a lot.
That's why I called the book Kind Dynamite, because of the combination I was saying a few minutes ago about warmth and competence. It's warmth and dynamism, which is a slight variation on the word dynamite. When we put all of these elements together, the more dynamic speaker is, the more credible speaker. But you don't have to be dynamic every single minute. Again, you want that variety.
Being dynamic every single minute is also exhausting.
No kidding.
It's exhausting for you, but it's also exhausting to witness.
Exactly.
Judge Whitten, I think we are on number 9. What is it?
It's leaning in. Leaning in. I think this gets back to this. There's a lot of stuff on this section. First, know that the jurors are watching. And I mean, they are watching all the time, not when you're on, but when you're off, when you're sitting at your table, when you're listening to the other side's opening or closing or examination of a witness, they're watching you. Some of them are always watching you. When you're walking from the garage to the courthouse, someone's watching you. So there's a really cool little example that I think I got from the book. Maybe I got it from teaching this week. I'm not sure. But a lawyer said, yeah, when I get a witness on cross-examination and I've asked them a really good, tight cross-examination question, it's leading, it's got one fact, there's no quibble words, it's a really good question. And they start giving me a narrative answer. I like to turn around and walk back to my table and pour a glass of water and completely show the jury that I'm ignoring them. And I think it really impressed some other people in the room. And I thought, that's exactly wrong. The jurors want you to see, they want to see you be respectful at all times. They want to see you listening because you're listening carefully to something that's right or that's wrong. So that leaning in speaks with your body before your mouth opens. And it tells the jurors that you're interested, that you're paying attention, that it's all important to you. So that leaning in is nonverbal. I'm here, I'm present, I'm paying attention. This is important stuff. I want you to do the same. I think it's a great, and again, these are not things outside our control. We can change this. We can, it's not that hard to get that. I'm not talking about like leaning into getting in anyone's space, but just the leaning forward in the way you would if you were attentively listening to someone who is telling a story like Marcy was a minute ago. I I don't remember, but I think I probably did start to lean forward to listen to her story.
Well, I'm going to announce that the 10th attribute of assertive delivery is using purposeful hand gestures. Dr. Lisko, what should we know about using our hands?
Okay, well, this is a fun one to describe, not visually. So, the one thing to consider is I probably get asked this question more than any other. I'll be working with an attorney and they'll say, Karen, what do I do with my hands when I'm speaking? And I always ask back, tongue in cheek, what do you usually do with your hands? In other words, people tend to gesture naturally just fine until they overthink it and then they worry about it. So, my first piece of advice is always try to give yourself grace and don't worry so much about what's going on with your hand gestures. Yes, there are times someone overuses the same gesture over and over and over again, and that is a problem because people do notice that it's almost like a monotone use of your hands. But the biggest thing you can do is to occasionally pepper in, and I really mean it when I say the word occasionally, pepper in illustrative gestures. Those are ones where you have consciously pre-thought where you might use something to illustrate. It's like the word sounds. So, for example, if I say, he took a picture, I might use my hands holding them up to my face to pretend like I'm using, you have to now do it with a smartphone. Used to be we could click with an Instamatic, but you're going to miss some of your fact finder if you don't go generationally astute. Or if you just say there are three things that matter and you put one finger up on the right hand, second finger up on the left, third finger up on the third. But the part that people want to be alert to is getting your elbows away from your sides. Because sometimes people just pseudo gesture, even when they're illustrative gesturing, and it doesn't look very confident. You want to make your gestures bigger. You want to make your presence bigger. Marcy, it's back to what you were saying with Amy Cuddy and the power pose. It's being comfortable taking up more space visually with your body. And this can be a gender thing. Men tend to expand into space by having their feet planted wider and their arms out larger. Women traditionally sometimes fold in more. And that's something we need to do better. We need to be uncomfortable being a larger version of ourselves, especially when you're speaking in a larger space or a larger courtroom. So it's important for your viewer to see that confidence. And when you're gesturing, get those elbows away from your body and gesture in a bigger way.
I will say that when it comes to hands, make sure that your pockets are empty, so you're not jangling coins, you're not clicking a pen in with your thumb, you're not fiddling around with your wedding band, because those are really distracting to look at.
And that's a good point for video review. I mean, that's exactly as you said, why it's so wise in our NEDA training. As hard as it is for some people to watch themselves on video, to catch themselves in the act of doing something, again, that they just might not be aware they're doing. It's a better teacher than all of us to show the video. And, you know, we as faculty have to be willing to also see ourselves on video and take our lumps and learn from what we see when we're watching our own stuff back.
Judge Whitten, we are at number 11. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, it kind of goes with the lean in. This is maintaining an active audience face. Every time I read that phrase, Karen, I thought of the other face that people always talk about that starts with two words too, resting. But it is kind of the same. You want a default face that is listening, and for the same reason we lean in. We want the jurors to be active, to be listening the whole time. If we aren't mirroring that, then they're not going to do it. And I'll give you an example. A lawyer on direct asks a question and then looks in their notes or is not actively listening and in fact is actively not listening. The jury, the judge, everybody else takes that as this is my sign where I can turn the attention level down to 50%. Because this is not important stuff. The jury's watching you always, even when the other person, maybe your opposing counsel, maybe the judge, maybe your witness, when they're talking, you need to be listening and you want the jury to be listening. And that does not translate to if you act like you're not listening, the jury won't listen. So if there's bad evidence coming in and you decide that's the time to look like you're uninterested, the jury's just going to notice that, hey, something's different. I wonder why he's acting weird. This must be important. Must be really harmful to him. So I think maintaining a sort of a default active listening face, active audience face, really, really helps with your persuasiveness.
I think that also, if we can add 12, which is our last one to this, it totally picks up where you left off, Chris, because I call it the hinging head. And I admit this is a term I made up out of whole cloth. I don't have a research study to cite for you on the hinging head, but it's exactly what you just said about the listening face doubled. In other words, if Judge Whitten and I are sitting next to each other presenting, or standing on our feet next to each other lecturing in a NEDA lecture, we have a responsibility to one another as co-presenters. And for example, if Chris is speaking, my job is to be the arrow for the audience and to be looking toward Chris, occasionally nodding my head, but knowing that I'm the arrow for the listener. If I'm looking like I'm off script or offline, in other words, if I visually shut down and I don't even look his way, I've just done what you said, Chris. I've said to the audience, I'm invisible and Chris isn't interesting. And Chris is always interesting. So it's my job as his colleague to occasionally look his way and nod so that I'm showing that I'm still nonverbally engaged and taking it in. The perfect example is when you see news co-anchors on television. You know they're doing it and they've been trained to do that. It also, by the way, applies outside the courtroom when I watch or coach people in pitches where the trial team or the corporate lawyer team is on one side of the table pitching this prospective client. It's amazing to me when I'm watching and recording them do their pitch in the practice that the ones not speaking often just visually go blank. And what they should be doing is taking an active role and looking fascinated by what their colleague speaker is doing. That's the hinging head. And it takes reminding and active thinking about it as the co-presenter. You still have a job to do when you're not speaking.
I think we've talked about a lot of little things, and all of these little things are little things. You're not going to win a trial because you smiled. You're not going to lose a trial because you didn't have, an active listening face, or you lost your lowest natural pitch. But these little things combined are the difference between the lawyer who is trusted by the jury and the lawyer who isn't. You have two equal lawyers. Both of them know the facts. Both of them know the law. They are equal in all ways except for these 12 small things. The one who's mastered these 12 things will win 10 times out of 10.
Well said. I could not agree more. It really is the combination of all of them. It's just that what is hopeful here is by dissecting them, it helps people practice those skills individually. It's what I've come to as the best way I can think of to teach it. And it takes practice. It takes being thoughtful, perhaps as someone is practicing, thinking about one of them at a time or a few of them at a time. It's an additive building kind of skill set, and it takes practice. This is not an automatic, but it's definitely worth it because it can make a dramatic difference, just like you said, Chris.
Yeah, Michael Jordan didn't make his freshman basketball team, but he practiced, he got better. We can do the same.
That's awesome.
Like I said, I knew that this was going to be an information-packed episode and that I personally would come away with takeaways, and I hope that our listeners have too. And this episode was free, Just imagine what you will get if you attend a NITA program. Do either of you have any teaching engagements coming up this month? Judge Whitten, I'll start with you.
Yes, I do, but I don't want to talk about it. I want to talk. I want to talk about one that I love that NITA is doing every year now, the NITA Women in Trial program that's coming up. And Karen, I know, is going to be there and imparting all of this wisdom. And it is just such a special thing. I'm just so happy that NITA does it. That I want to give it a shout out. It's going to be in Kansas City this year, Kansas City,
Right.
Missouri, September 16th to 19th. Go.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I love teaching at any NITA program, but this one, the Women in Trial, is special. There's a special energy there, a camaraderie, shared experiences, positivity, and such depth of information. Judge Amy Hanley is the program director for it. We're thankful to the firm hosting us, Hush Blackwell. It's in a really cool setting in Kansas City. If you've been there, it's off the Country Club Plaza, lots of great outdoor shops and restaurants. We're staying at a nice historic hotel, so all good reasons, but none better than just what that feeling and that experience is like with the women in trial. It's just awesome. Another one that I've got coming up, but not this month, Marcy, is the Advanced Trial Skills Program. That one's November 9 through 12. And it's also a really cool one because it's not for the beginner. It is, as it says, the Advanced Trial Skills Program. And it's not that a litigator needs a huge, deep bench of trials under their belt to attend, but it's good to have some experience in that and to just come very alert to where you want to fill the gaps in being a better advocate. And this one is taught by the amazing Annie Dietz and Mariana Hogan, or I should say they're the program directors for it, with a really fabulous faculty. But it's really cool because we all know what it's like to have been practicing in our field for a while, but to be able to go next level, that's very, very cool. And that's where you really can sharpen because you've already identified for yourself where your gaps are. And that's what this is meant to do. It's just to make it become something where you feel even more savvy and stronger in what you can build on. So I'm excited for that one too.
Yeah, those are two great programs. Judge Whitten, I know that you don't want to talk about where you're teaching, but I do want to bring up San Diego because that, for a long time, you were the program director and you have handed the reins over. And it's an incredible program. It's always one of our most popular throughout the year.
Oh, it's great. And Andrew Hayden and Frankie and Sarah do a great job with it as program directors, far better than we did. And it's fun. I'm going to it. It's in San Diego in October. Like, you got to be kidding me. It's on the water. You look out the window from the conference room and you can't see the water because there's sailboats.
Yeah, it's very nice. Well, I'm going to post the links for those programs if you're interested and you would like to register. We would love to work with you all. Final question. It involves one of my favorite topics of all, travel. I wonder if both of you have taken a summer vacation yet, or if you're waiting until the end of the year. Who would like to go first?
I want to hear from Chris on this one first.
So my wife and I are going to someplace we've never been. We've been invited. A friend has a house in Costa Rica, but in the middle of nowhere, Costa Rica, on the coast, an hour or so south of the airport, the main airport there, next week.
Oh,
and
fun.
He's been asking us to go down there for a couple of years, and we finally planned it way in advance. And so I'm really looking forward to going down. There's 4 couples going, so it should be a lot of fun. And there'll be no law, all lawyers, but no law talk.
That's cool.
It should be fun.
Yeah.
And what about you, Dr. Lisko?
Well, my husband and I have fulfilled a lifelong goal of actually buying a property in Spain. So we are going to be spending our time working on a little apartment we bought in San Sebastian, Spain, that's right on the border of France. No, there are no fires there, in case people are wondering. But we've done what we sometimes do on the domestic side and that is it's a fixer-upper. So now we get the joy of having a mortgage in 2 countries and a fixer-upper in 2 countries at the same time. So we might need our heads examined over that, but we're up to the challenge, and we're excited to put our stamp on it and then get to enjoy it as we do the renovation.
Hey, Marcy, ask me where I'm going on vacation next summer.
Could it be... Oh gosh, why is it escaping me right now?
You're invited.
It rhymes with San Sebastian.
Totally invited. We'll give you a hammer.
Put him to work.
I might wait till the fixer-upper is fixer-upped a little more.
Yeah, smart. Super smart.
Well, thank you so much for this truly wonderful, fun episode. I really appreciate having the chance to talk to you both, and I hope that our listeners have enjoyed it too.
Great. Perfect.
Perfect.
As a little bonus, in the show notes, you'll find a link to download a free PDF of these tips. There's also a link to Dr. Lisko's book, Kind Dynamite, in case you'd like to learn more about it. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate May the Record Reflect on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to leave a comment, you may do so in the comments section on YouTube, where you can find us under @NITA-videos. Or you can reach out directly to us by email at onair@nita.org. We appreciate having you here and would enjoy hearing from you. Please join us again next month when I'll be speaking with NITA Program Director Steve Wood about direct examination. Until then, we wish you the very best of luck in your depositions, motions, and trials. Happy lawyering! May the Record Reflect is a NITA Studio 71 production. NITA. We are advocacy enhanced, mentorship reimagined. Welcome to the community.